Basically, water, and they kind of bring this up in the article, the one-page article about my book. I've always had a fascination for water and healing. I actually had my first totem, what's called in Native American traditions, totem experience at about 18 months. And it was with a water animal. It was a moose. And it was, I'll never forget it. It was, and I didn't realize it at the time because, and again, it comes back to this whole idea of the circle, is that over a period of time, as I began to work with water in the process of cleansing, and it comes back to some of the things that I was mentioning earlier, watching for certain responses, and why does this person have that response and this one doesn't? And so the three major influences on a ceremony relating to water is, first of all, hydration. Hydration to the cell. And how many of you here drink water every day? Or try to? Okay, so you, sir, why do you drink water?
Well, our cells need water to function.
Okay, so that's a good point. Every cell in our body, and you have 10 trillion or more cells, need hydration. Now the problem is, and in my book I talk about this, and see in the old books, when people like traditionally would do enemas, for example, they did it during a change of season. So the fall, the winter, the spring, the summer, it was very much in a lot of traditions to do some type of cleanse. And there was a reason for that, because first of all, you're changing your diet. Secondly, you're also experiencing temperature changes. Those two, in and of itself, can cause you to become more dehydrated. And so when your body, and now we're fast forwarding it now, and I have some of this research in my book, but back in 2003, when I was attending a conference on cancer by a medical doctor, Dr. Heinrich Kramer, he talked about, at that point in time, that the 17 million synthetic compound was registered with the U.S. government. 17 million compounds. There's no way we can get enough water. A lot of these compounds are in and of themselves dehydrated. So, and I've seen this over and over again. So back to the way that this works, and again, it's in the book, is that the colon has a unique structure. It can balance hydration to drainage. And I didn't realize it. It took me a while to get this. But the key in cleaning the blood is seeing drainage responses. And if you don't see the drainage responses, you are not cleansing your blood. And so people that do a cleanse, and Marlene's, for example, has a lot of wonderful products here. For example, how many of you here have done a heavy metal cleanse of some sort? Okay, so how many of you here have just done a cleanse? Like changed your diet around? I mean, it could be as simple as, I'm not going to eat donuts in the morning anymore. Or just whatever. Wherever you're starting from, that's your cleanse, right? Well, one of the keys to your cleanse is drinking your water. So what's the proper ratio? Well, the generalized ratio is if you take your body weight, you divide it in half. So say if you weigh 150 pounds, that's 75 pounds. You should be drinking 75 ounces of water a day. Okay, so, and as I mentioned earlier, I work in Alaska a lot, and a lot of the guys that come in to see me, they're fishermen, they're sailors, and so I'll never forget this. I had a couple of different guys coming in. These are big guys. I mean, you're talking 250, 300-pound guys. And just in the hydration component of the ceremony, it can take up to an hour. Okay? Now, after a person does several of these in a row, you get cumulative responses where you start maintaining your hydration. So in other words, it's like charging up a car battery, where your body begins to hold the water better. And I cite several examples of this in the book, but one of the examples was, so I was seeing these guys in a row, and they were getting all the hydration responses, all the drainage responses, and then that night, the weather, it was about 17 degrees, and that night there was a huge storm, and it dropped the wind chill to 0. And the winds were going anywhere from 40 to 70 miles an hour. And so these guys were out all night long, tying boats down, tying, here or there, all night long. And they come in the next day, and this was after they had drainage from the liver, drainage from the immune system, everything was cranking. They come in the next day, took an hour for them to hydrate. The next guy, hour. They both told me, Dirk, we were drinking our water all night long. But see, temperature change, wind, dehydrated them. That's one of many examples. Lori?
If I could just clarify, so when you first come in for the ceremony and you're connected all hygienically to a system where water is filtering into your colon, I think what you're saying, it's my experience is, at first, it's like if you're, sorry, I don't mean to hijack the thing.
No.
But like, if you're dying of thirst, really seriously, they say it can be worse to give you water by mouth. They will often rehydrate you through an enema, just a water enema. Well, it's the same principle. So when you first get hooked up in the ceremony, at first your body just sucks up all the water. That's what he's saying. It takes your body just loves all the water, so you don't even see anything else happening. That might be all that happens for several minutes or an hour, or the first few sessions even, because you're so dehydrated, and you can tell because you start getting your lips start puffing up a little more, and you can tell when you're, so isn't that correct?
And yeah, and see that, and so in other words, and it basically, because, and I have a drawing of this, because of the structure of the colon, if you look at the colon at a microscopic level, it looks like one giant RO membrane. And that, do you know what an RO membrane is? Reverse osmosis membrane. It's used for water purification. It's usually a round membrane. Water is pushed through it, and anything bigger than a half a micron can't get through. So what I'm using during the ceremony, and again, took me many years to learn this, and it should have been the elephant in the room, is I use ultra-purified pH-balanced water. I use a variety of techniques. As I said in the book, no two colons are alike. And I mean, there's always a learning curve. Every person that I work on, there's no other person like them on the planet. So therefore, things that I do with that person based on certain, evoking certain responses, I may not do with another person. And this comes back to the range of techniques that I use. And this is all, some of it, like I said in the book, came out of some old books that were written about. Others were just doing it over and over and over. So hydration, getting water to the cell. Once that takes place, then you see the second major response that we're looking for. That is drainage. How many of you here have done coffee enemas, for example? Okay, a couple hands. So what a coffee enema is used, and Gerson first introduced it, I think it was back in the 30s, and then Dr. Robert Kelly in the 50s, but it's used because it's a cholagogue. It stimulates the liver to produce bile. And there's various ways to do that. For example, when you first get up in the morning, you've been in a fasting mode. If you take a hot beverage, and it can be a hot cup of coffee, a hot cup of tea, lemon water, it could be just a hot cup of water, and you take that and you sip it like that. Like that. That will have a cholagogue influence on your liver. It will make the liver produce extra bile to flush, to cleanse. And so with a coffee enema, if you're successful with it in that goal, a person may get 1 to 3 purges off of one coffee enema. During one pio ceremony, I've seen as many as 50 purges. Okay, so again, how do we do that? As the water is being absorbed, hydrostatic pressure builds up in the blood. Part of that water goes to your liver. Hydrostatic pressure builds up in the liver. You can feel an increasing pressure, and at some point, there's a tipping response where it triggers the liver into excretion, where it purges. You can feel it, and you can see it. You can observe the purges. Bile is what colors your stool. It can be orange, red, dark brown, black, green, yellow. It can be fluorescent colors if there's a lot of solvents, pesticides, formaldehyde, you name it. Certain substances that make the bile look day glow. It can be various thicknesses. The old timers called it bile mud, dead cells, damaged liver cells. So there's different kinds of things you watch for from the liver. And you can feel when it releases, it's like a dam breaking, like whoosh. And you see it going through, and it stimulates peristalsis. And that's a part of another part that we do in here, and related to a question I'm going to be asking in a few minutes, is basically it tones. That's where the hydrotoning comes in. So PIO is an acronym. Precision, intestinal, oxidative, hydrotoning. Ceremony means that it's every person that comes in to me is sent to me by my Creator to get help from me. I'm a medicine man. My medicine is water and oxygen, and that's what I use during the ceremony. And you are a spirit residing in your temples, and if you're suffering, and I'm not pushing any spiritual belief here, but how many of you here just believe in it that there's something bigger than you out there, something, even at that? Okay, so irrespective or irregardless of anything, there's just good old gravity. And any of us that say, okay, I'm going to walk off this railing and fly, what do you think is going to happen? I don't think so. I might fly for a second, maybe at the most. But then, wham, right? Okay, but yet, we do stupid things to our body, and I do stupid things to my body when I say that, by the way. I'm also talking to the hardest person I've ever worked with right now. But in any case, we all do things every day. Now, some things we don't, we are ignorant. Like, if you don't chew your food enough, and the book talks about some of these things too, then guess what? It's not going to get digested, because that's where digestion starts. And if that food doesn't get chewed properly, and I don't care if it's an organic carrot, if you don't chew it down enough, it goes into your gut, and it's going to cause irritation. You're not going to, the cells, here's a little tiny cell, it's going to be looking up at this. What is this big orange thing? I can't use this. What is this? What's going on here with this guy, right? So, chew your food. That's one thing. Well, so all that being said, once we get on our learning curve and we realize, everything that my body is going through, there's something that my body's trying to tell me. And that is learning to listen. And so one of the models that I have in here is based on that, another wheel called the colonic compass. And that is also in this book. But it's just the concept that all the symptoms in your body mean something. Like, for example, gosh, I get a headache every day, so I think I'll take aspirin. Well, I'm sorry, but you're not getting a headache because you're deficient in aspirin. Your body is trying to tell you something. Now, maybe your neck is out, or maybe you're stressed on your job, or maybe your liver needs a cleanse. And it could be all of the above, because guess what? Everything is related. And in our culture, so many times, everything's been cut into parts here, parts there. So what I attempt to do in this book is lay out the concept that everything in your body, mind, body, spirit, emotion, is interacting constantly all the time. And learning how to listen to that. So hydration, drainage, the second key response. So I mentioned bile from the liver, lymphatic drainage. You've got lymph nodes in your neck, your armpits, your breasts, your abdomen, your groin, your legs. In your abdomen alone, and I got some really amazing drawings in there about that too. In your abdomen alone, you have over 200 lymph nodes. including your spleen, which is a giant lymph node. But over and above that, in the entire colon, you have, and again, microscopic, and there's a picture of that as well in the book, a layer of what's called lymphoid tissue. This lymphoid tissue is responsible to remove up to 80% of the dead white blood cells that you produce on a daily basis. And if you have a fairly healthy immune system, just as I say the sentence, you've made an average of 300,000 to 500,000 white blood cells. And so over the years, through finding information in some of these old books, and then just anecdotal, repeat, watching over and over again, you can see white blood cell die-off. And white blood cell die-off will be, they're garbage truck drivers. They take out the trash from the blood. And so part of what you see with people, and a lot of people nowadays, if you look at them, they look puffy. And that puffiness is inflammation. It's backed up lymph. When people remove, when you see the lymph, and you can drain as much as 5 gallons of lymph during one of these ceremonies. It's mind-boggling. And it's only because of the exchange. Water to drainage. Water to drainage. It's like a teeter-totter. Simple as that. And then, so that's the other key drainage. So the removal of the lymph, people's faces, the puffiness goes away. That's another key response. There's other responses too. There are adhesion molecules, scar tissue. There's die-off. You can see that as well. You can see other things like, how well you're chewing your food. So there's a whole range of things that you can see, of information you can gather from your own body that tells you, it gives you an idea, at least in part, of what's going on in your system. And then the third major influence that I do is aerobic supplementation. And I mentioned his name in the book, Dr. William Turska. And I've also been to Germany. I trained in oxygen ozone therapies in Germany, as well as with Dr. Turska. But a lot of the doctors, and over the years, what I realized is, how many of you here are familiar with oxygen therapies of various sorts? Like if you do deep breathing exercises, guess what you're doing to yourself? Oxygen therapy. If you do anything aerobic, if you get your heart rate up, guess what? You're giving yourself some oxygen therapy. Water, H2O. Water, and especially when it's ultra-purified pH balanced water, and energetically, you're getting oxygen when you drink your water. When you eat your salad and your salad bar. Even dried herbs. When you look at a dried herb in a microscopic level, and you see in the plant cell, you can actually see bubbles of oxygen in the cell. Every living plant contains oxygen. So there's various ways to get it. But guess what? How many of you here have been stuck in rush hour traffic before? Breathing carbon monoxide. I've done that many times. But anyway, so in terms of, there's many challenges to our body now where that oxygen, the need for oxygen, water's here, you need it, right? Oxygen is up here. And again, learning the lessons and the medicine wheel, the medicine bundle and so forth. And this was back in the 90s when I read this, but scientists were studying different animals that lived a long time. And they were studying sea turtles that some of them, they estimate, live up to 1,000 years old. And one of the interesting facts that they discovered is that in addition to breathing through their noses, the sea turtles would take in air into their colons, absorb the oxygen, and expel the other gases. Wow, what a concept. That's part of what you do during the Pio ceremony. At some point, we bubble what I call, and again, in the book, polyatomic oxygen mixtures. And these mixtures are bioavailable. Water is an ionic compound. Polyatomic oxygen, and that means 3 or more unattached atoms of oxygen. They mix together, they form a mixture, and it's very dynamic and cascading. And again, all of this is very gentle. And it's because some people, no, I don't use a fire hose when I do this. But anyway, sorry, bad poet joke. But anyway, it's very gentle, but it's also very intense in the respect, you know, here you are most of the time, you relax comfortably during the ceremony, you can see what's going on. I do a series of visceral manipulation techniques where you learn something new every time. I mean, I've had people who have seen me for years, and every time they come back, they say, Dirk, every time I'm here, I leave here, I know more. I know more stuff that you could have never imagined. So your body is your best teacher. And I'm just a coach. I'm just somebody that does, I have my medicine bundle. I work with a certain component. And I talk about that in the book as well. All the different modalities that are out there, and what to do, what to choose, and all of that stuff as well. But the fact is that, again, every single one of you here there's nobody else like you. But how many of you here have a colon? Okay, probably everybody. But in any case, the fact is that the colon is an amazing system. There's a lot more to it than what we've been told, and even by gastroenterologists. Just like one component, and this was just discovered back in 1999. How many of you here have heard of the book, Your Gut Has a Mind of Its Own, or by Gershon, Your Second Brain? And this was discovered like by accident in that a medical doctor, Michael Gershon, was doing research for pharmaceutical interests, and he was studying how to block serotonin or how to make more serotonin or whatever. And at that point, it was thought that the brain is what makes serotonin. So he did this research and studies and so forth, and when he got his results back, he was in shock. Because guess what, folks? Serotonin is not made in the brain. It is made in the colon and the liver and sent to the brain. And he had to do a double take, rub his eyes a couple times, because you know the researcher types, they are up all hours. But anyway, he said, I can't publish this. I'm going to be attacked almost immediately. I've got to go through this again. So he sends out the experiments to other labs, independent labs. He does it himself again. At the end of that time, bingo, same thing. He publishes it. Guess what happens? He gets attacked, okay? Because it's hard to change the paradigm. To this day, here it is, 2014, I finally did see a gastroenterology book published in 2006 that actually had a chapter in it called Your Gut-Brain Axis. But to this day, if a medical doctor hasn't trained, a gastroenterologist trained in medical school recently, they still tell you that the colon, all the colon is a sewage pipe. No, my friends, it's a lot more than just a sewage pipe. And so that's that. Does that help answer the question you asked? And then back to dehydration and chemicals. Like, I've worked on a lot of people recovering from chemotherapy, and it's not unusual for that person to do nothing but absorb water for anywhere from 3 to as many as 10 of these ceremonies. That's how dehydrated chemotherapy and how much it messes up their system. And I'm not here to be dogmatic or criticize anyone. I just want to say there are other options out there besides poisoning yourself. Or, you know, some people are so quick, you go get an organ cut out. You know, surgery should be the last resort. So, you know, nothing else, this book will open up some things that there are other things you can do besides the standard whatever else is out there. Yes?
After you read the book, can you do this yourself? And or do you still have to practice?
I practice. I'm a medicine man. I work with Pio ceremony. I'm appointed by the Clinket, and I'm a healer.